What's a NSFW detail about a historical figure that's normally left out of the history books? Ancient Egyptians believed the god Atum created the universe by masturbating to ejaculation, and that the ebb and flow of the Nile corresponded to how much he came. To honor this, the pharaohs ceremonially masturbated into the river. Horus and Set also tried to impregnate each other with their semen in a couple of myths. It's becoming more well known, but Mozart wrote a chorale literally called Lick My Ass to piss off the bishop who employed him in Salzburg, hoping to get fired so he could go to Vienna. Lewis and Clark described the screaming shtiess that they got from eating unfamiliar food, camas, in detail in their journals. Scientists were able to track Lewis and Clark's campsites by following the mercury they shat out all across America. Probably said here elsewhere, but Victor Hugo, author of The Hunchback of Notre Dame, among other tales, was a notorious philanderer who had affairs on top of affairs with prostitutes throughout his life. When he died, all of the brothels in Paris had to close because so many prostitutes attended his funeral. He also would write naked and ask someone to keep his clothes outside the door so he'd continue writing. And this kinky grandad was visiting brothels while into his old age. Heard that he had a mark in his diary for each sort of visit? After Alan Turing cracked the Enigma code, essentially ending WW 2 years earlier than expected and saving countless lives, he was thanked by the British government in the form of chemical castration, all because he was a gay man. And when you are homophobic, but realize that a computer is a gay man's invention. Patrick Henry, the American founding father better known for his quote, "Give me liberty or give me death," kept his wife imprisoned in a cellar because of her frequent outbursts due to postpartum depression. His wife had eventually died in that cellar, and he had buried her in an unmarked grave. 10/10 quote, but the wife killing part always seems to get left out of history texts. Pyotr Tchaikovsky was a submissive bottom. In one note, never before published in Russian or English, Tchaikovsky wrote of a young servant with whom I'm more in love than ever, adding, "My God, what an angelic creature, and how I long to be his slave, his plaything, his property." French President Flix-4 died while getting his dong sucked. The whole press joked about his fate, with numerous word games. The lady he was with was nicknamed the Pompe Funèbre, which is the name for funeral services in French, and also literally means funeral pump. There was also, as one of the comments described, the phrase he wished to be Caesar, but was only Pompey. Pompey is pomp in French and its pronunciation is identical to pomp, which means pumped. Big dongs were considered barbaric in ancient history. The Greeks especially thought that it showed men with big rock-hard full-blooded clocks were full of lust and low intelligence. This is why most of their statues today have them displaying a small dong. I was born in the wrong age. Edit. Tie for the awards, friends. It's said that Henry VIII exploded in his coffin. Dogs then licked up the Henry juice. As I mentioned in a different comment, this also happened to William I, aka William the Conqueror. Church reeked of dead body for days. Apparently he swelled in his coffin, opening it slightly. Some poor soul attempted to close the coffin again, and the results were very messy. Gallagher stage show levels of messy. The first thing the father of microbiology, Anton van Leeuwenhoek, put under a microscope was semen. They understood that semen was integral to the creation of life, but didn't yet understand the concept of single-cell organisms. He fully expected to see tiny little humans in his jizz. So yeah, the first thing he did was whack off on a slide and look at it. Princess Diana and her leg gadget, a Ressex toy that she carried around with her when she went on diplomatic trips. She had even shown a table of foreign officials her toy as a prank on numerous occasions. She also believed it brought her good luck. One time she forgot to bring it with her and actually asked a bodyguard to go back to the hotel to fetch it for her. Edit. Okay, just checked. And she apparently left it all the way back in the UK while on a trip to Nepal, not just at a hotel, and ordered it to be dispatched to the capital Kathmandu. There are bunches of photos in the press of Diana smiling holding a mine link. img.com/sfpack8 JPG with headlines talking about her bravery etc. Not shown in most pictures was the guy guiding Diana in the minefield. An ex-British army guy who was working for a charity/NGO dealing with mines. A former housemate of mine worked with him some years later and paged on this anecdote about why Diana was laughing/smiling at this moment as the guy handed her the deactivated mine. Told her its name, origin, what it would do to someone when activated. He then said, "I bet you'd love shove one of these up Camilla's asshole." George Washington had severe hemorrhoids to the extent that he couldn't even ride a horse into battle sometimes and had to be pulled on a cart. Guess we now know why he was standing on the boat in that one painting. Washington, no, it's fine. You brave men deserve the seats. I'd rather stand anyway. Soldiers, what a thoughtful and stoic leader. After Alois Alzheimer gave the first ever speech describing the symptoms of what would later become known as Alzheimer's disease, no one in the audience asked him any questions or made any follow-up comments, despite the fact that this was quite literally one of the most important presentations ever given in the field of medicine. For real, Alzheimer's disease affects about 6% of people aged 65 and older. Link. Wikipedia. org/wiki/alzheimer%27s_disease. It's a big deal. So why did no one pay it much attention? Turns out they were all much more focused on the next guy on the docket, who, allegedly, was there to talk about compulsive masturbation. Paul Revere would ride from Boston to Newport Reed to cheat on his wife. No, babe. For real. The redcoats are actually coming. I swear. In school I was taught that Ben Franklin had a string of pearls that was several feet long. He would add a pearl to it each time he slept with a new woman. JC, what kind of school did you go to? The School of Hard Clocks. President Grover Cleveland, 49, married Frances Folsom, 21, in the White House. He was basically her godfather and even bought her a baby bed when she was an infant. She knew him as Uncle Grover as a child and told him she wanted to marry him in the White House one day. Link. Vox.com/2015/2/27/8,120,283/House of Cards marriage. Ben Franklin was a notorious flirt and hit on and/or plowed just about every woman he ever met. Single women, married women, young women, old women, women of title, women of the royal line, Protestant women, Catholic women, all of them. Kaiser Wilhelm II, the last German emperor, wrote various sexual letters to his mum when he was a teenager. Little late but worth a shot. Elizabeth Bishop and Robert Lowell, the poets, had a 30-year letter exchange where Robert, while married, swooned over Elizabeth after he initially met her, declaring his love and want to propose for her all while being married, and her blatant denial and uncomfortable lesbian anguish at this fact. He threatened suicide and lots of self-harm. Walsh's just like, haha, let's read this book together and not think about romance. He was a manic cocaine freak, and she was a crazy alcoholic lesbian with a tickun. She drank rubbing alcohol when denied conventional drinks. There's a great play highlighting these events called Dear Elizabeth. He was a manic cocaine freak, and she was a crazy alcoholic lesbian with a tickun, is my new favorite sentence. The great magician Houdini once escaped a prison cell while fully nude as to not hide anything to escape. However, what the guards failed to check was that he hid a skeleton key in his ass checks. Freud loved cocaine. He had a friend with a morphine addiction, and he thought giving the guy cocaine would cure him. It did not. Abigail Adams apparently spent a lot of time worrying that her son John Quincy Adams would jerk off or bang whores when he left the house, and advised against doing both in several letters to him. You must only do that at home, son. Have a good day at school, son. Don't forget your lunch, and remember, if anyone offers you a whore, just say no. Gaius Julius Caesar was a huge player He slept with at least one woman in every town he visited according to his soldiers. He slept with the Queen of Egypt. He slept with his rivals, Cato the Younger's sister. He also slept with a mother and her daughter, not at the same time. This was fitting as he claimed descent from Venus, the goddess of love and lust. Not only did he sleep with Cato's sister, Caesar also read an explicit love letter from her in the middle of a Senate meeting because Cato thought the letter was proof of a conspiracy against the state. There are dongs everywhere in Pompeii. Dongs everywhere. On walls, streets, posts, carved into wood and stone, arranged in tile mosaics. They're all over the duck-in place. You can't swing a cat without whacking a sklang. They're used as arrows to point to brothels. Scrawled on walls in graffiti about how good the women are in the city. When you went to the baths, you'd put your clothes in little cubby holes, and you'd remember which column of cubbies you left them and buy the mosaic of a particular Essex act above said column. America owes its victory in the revolution partly to a flamingly gay Prussian nobleman with a penchant for polyamory. Baron Friedrich Wilhelm von Steuben had served in the Prussian army under Frederick the Great, but was forced out due to his complete lack of discretion about his homosexuality. In Paris he met up with Ben Franklin, who offered to introduce him to Washington at the time. The American forces were getting their raises handed to them by the British and they needed, more than anything, someone with experience in training armies, to transform them from a ragged militia into a proper fighting force. They weren't in a position to be picky. Von Steuben, who was blackballed from military service in Europe and increasingly unwelcome in France, took the job. He arrived at Valley Forge in uniform, accompanied by his dog and his 3 French lovers, who also served as his aides-de-camp and translators, and set about training the American army. Because he didn't speak English, his boyfriend/translator Louis de Pontier would write von Steuben's instructions in French for him and hand them off to Alexander Hamilton to be translated into English for the men, using a technique where he would personally instruct 10 men and then have each of them go and teach 10 more. Von Steuben more or less single-handedly retrained the entire American army in the latest and greatest of European military techniques. His training manual was in use until the Civil War and still forms the basis of the US military training manual used today. After the Revolution, Congress granted von Steuben US citizenship and a massive estate in New York, where he lived the rest of his life in seclusion with 2 handsome American soldiers who were half his age. You had to be pretty flagrantly gay to be banged by Frederick the Great, probably the gayest king since Alexander. And France, literally the earliest nation to decriminalize homosexuality. Mary Shelley, the author of Frankenstein, who also popularized Gothic literature, used to meet up with her future husband, poet Percy Shelley, at the cemetery where her mother was buried. They would meet up and have angsty sex on her mother's grave. BC she was goth as hell. Moreover, Frankenstein was inspired by her fascination with reanimation, the idea of bringing something dead back to life. When she learned about this idea, she was obsessed with the idea of bringing back her baby who died days later after being born, thus sparking the idea of the monster of Frankenstein. That wasn't that unusual. Cemeteries also served as public parks until the 1900s. Her father disapproved of the twas union because Shelley was his apprentice, so they met in secret at the cemetery and had sex. Shelley was also married at the time and also had a child. His wife found out about the affair and committed suicide. Soon after, Percy Shelley and Mary Shelley eloped and had a baby who died and traveled Europe together. Percy Shelley proved to be a shitty husband and wanted to have multiple sexual partners, including Mary's sister. When Frankenstein was first published, Percy Shelley initially took credit for the novel. I wish I had sources, but I learned all of this in an English literature class by a professor who wrote her thesis on Mary Shelley. Edit. Sorry for the rambling. I just find her so fascinating and never have an excuse to talk about this. William the Bastard's family was torn apart when his 2 youngest sons dumped a chamber pot on the head of his firstborn, leading to rebellions, wars, and eventually his firstborn's lifelong imprisonment. Yeah, that's siblings for ya. Well, now my most upvoted comment is about how siblings can and will murder each other. Fun. Also thanks kind stranger. I'll be sure to pass on the favor. Simbolva had sex in every country he went with different women, and it's explained with details in his biography. He was a really good dancer. I like how his dancing skills are in parentheses. As if that detail is what we needed to clarify him having sex in every country. Edit. Okay, I get it, good dancing equals good sex. I'm gonna take up dancing lessons. I read once that philosopher Jean-Jacques Rousseau would pull his pants down and chase after women running backwards in hopes they would spank him. It was his kink. He would lurk in alleyways with his pantaloons around his knees and jump out as first at pacing women in the hopes they'd be so frightened they'd lash out and spank him. He was a total dunghead, but the mental image is hilarious. What the straight up duck? I did not learn this, and I have a whole damn philosophy degree. One of the members of the Lewis and Clark expedition was a slave named York. The tribes they came across were quite taken with him. He fathered many children during the trip. Ben Franklin slept around and mostly stayed in France for the prostitution. He also wrote at length the benefits of sleeping with older women, including their experience, lack of interest in anything exclusive, and inability to get pregnant. This man had it all figured out. Like this video and this good boy will be your mailman forever. We are Redditation, and we Redditate every day. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. Until then, check another video, or don't. Either way, have a wonderful day, you magnificent people.